We have a series of questions, 5 that we have come up with ahead of time, and then probably time for a few questions from our board members this morning. Each candidate gets 2 minutes apiece for each of these questions. We begin with General Conway to begin first. On our first question, what is your vision for Kentucky, specifically rural Kentucky, and the areas served by our member co-ops? Because smaller, rural areas of Kentucky are hurting. How are you going to help? What is your vision?
My vision for Kentucky is a state that has educational attainment and quality of life that exceeds the national average here within the next 8 years. That's my vision for Kentucky. And part of that is really focusing on our rural way of life. I think it's always good when you're looking at what someone will do, look at what they have done. As Attorney General, when I saw that our tobacco payment was in danger of being lost, I got on a plane, traveled around the country, and we saved the tobacco payment. In fact, we got the full allotment in this current budget cycle, and $60 million additional dollars going forward. Half of that money, as you know, goes into rural communities for agricultural diversification. And the reason I did that is I knew how important that investment in our rural economy was. When farmers in South Central Kentucky were swindled by Eastern Livestock, we not only put 2 of the people away, we actually got full restitution for all of those farmers. I want to be a governor that invests in the infrastructure of rural Kentucky, working with county judges. You know, Wendell Ford, my dear friend, used to joke that running for governor is like running for county judge at 120 counties. It kind of is. And then when you're the governor and you pick up the phone and you're talking to a county judge, you need to know, what are the infrastructure issues? What are the local issues that a governor can really help on? How do you move the levers of power and be effective for the counties that you serve? Now, one of the things that we're going to have to do to invest in rural Kentucky is invest in this broadband initiative. Now, Governor Beshear has started an initiative this year to build out the middle mile of broadband infrastructure. And it's important because as I go around Kentucky, particularly rural Kentucky, and I start talking about the fact that we're 47th in broadband access, all the heads start nodding. People have trouble connecting. And look, when I'm your governor next year, it's going to be tough to lure jobs to rural Kentucky if we don't have that basic connectivity. So we need that. Now, the governor has started this program. It's a public-private partnership. And that's why I believe in public-private partnerships, because this is an example where we can bring needed infrastructure to rural Kentucky. We'll also support industrial hemp and other things that can create jobs in rural Kentucky.
Mr. Bevan, 2 minutes.
You know, there's a verse in scriptures that without vision, the people will perish. And I think it's true enough for states as well. I think it's true politically as well. I think we have wandered a bit rudderless in recent years in this state with respect to having a vision. I don't know that we have one for rural Kentucky or for Kentucky in general. I think it's unfortunate. It's part of what drew me to this race, is that I have absolute confidence that this state could be such a greater version of itself than it is. And it will start in the rural communities. The one thing I know from having grown up in that world is that there is dignity that comes from having a job. There is dignity that comes from opportunity. There is dignity that comes from the self-respect and the self-confidence that comes from providing for oneself. My dad often had jobs that varied from place to place. He worked at a shoe factory. It burned down. His next job happened to be working at a McDonald's before he got a job at a wood mill. But there was always a job, and when there was satisfaction that came to our family from the fact that there was opportunity there. This is what we need. You all represent communities like the one that I grew up in. These things are critical. This is something very personal to me in some respects. I want a vision for this state where we believe in ourselves, where we have passion, that we know for a fact that we can become as good or better than anybody as it relates to manufacturing. We have the geographic proximity. We have the 4 seasons, none too extreme. There's no morning dawning like this on this date in Texas. I can tell you that right now. We are blessed with things you couldn't buy at any price. The riverways, the roadways, the 2 seams of coal that we have, the resources of timber, etc. We've got a good work ethic. Education is critical. We'll talk about that as we move forward. But so too is vocational training. So too is the ability to ensure that we have young people that don't just simply have an education, but that are prepared to actually enter the workforce. This is important not only in the early ages, but in the post-secondary years as well. This will be a focus, and as a business person, it'll be that mindset that I bring to the equation.
And you'll find that our questions dovetail into each other about the very issues that we're talking about. We'll stay with Mr. Bevan to begin with our next question, which concerns economic development. How do you plan specifically to grow jobs, encourage businesses to both stay in Kentucky, as well as attract new businesses to our Commonwealth?
It's interesting. That second point is a powerful one. So often people say, what will you do to bring the next GE, the next UPS, the next Ford, the next Toyota to come here? I'll tell you, it is important to think about how do we make sure those that are here actually stay. I've had conversations with many of the CEOs of some of our larger corporations, and they wrestle with this. And indeed, we've seen Toyota taking 1,600 white-collar jobs from northern Kentucky to Texas. This is a real concern for us. We have got to be serious about why we are being held back. We must pass right-to-work legislation. Has to happen. This is no longer an option. Big difference of opinion on this front, but I'm telling you, it has become a litmus test for Kentucky. And we are being passed by the Volvos who recently just went. How many of you would have loved to have had Volvo in your backyard? Seriously, think about it. $500 million initial capital investment, 2,000 initial jobs, growing to 4,000. We must pass right-to-work legislation. We must readdress our antiquated tax structure. Has to happen. We've got a very antiquated tax structure. Why are we taxing inventory in a state that could be a manufacturing hub? Why do we still have a death tax in this state? We've got to address things like Medicaid expansion. We cannot, no matter how some may like the idea of it, have 25, 30% of Kentuckians on Medicaid. It is unsustainable. There are ways we can provide for health care for people without burdening the rest of our society and the rest of our taxpayers with a price they cannot bear. These are things you need somebody who is a CEO, who is a leader, who is a business person to lead this state, to make the case to those companies that are here and to those that we would want to come, to be that this is a state worthy of investing in. And if we do not address the pension crisis, and I'm the only one standing here today who's put forward a solution to do it, then everything else we talk about is moot. We must address the pension crisis, or everything else will collapse due to our insolvency as a state.
General Conway, 2 minutes.
Well, first of all, I think creating jobs in Kentucky involves having a healthy economic development cabinet and one that has the right set of priorities. I have been there. I've been involved in economic development decisions over the last 20 years or so. I was there when we made the deal to help UPS expand. I understand how the economic development cabinet works. I understand the type of people you need to have over there and the relationships that you need to build. I understand how a governor is supposed to go in and close the deal. I do believe economic development incentives work. There's a big difference in this race in that opinion. I mean, we've had a theory here in Kentucky, and it's worked for the last decades, where we say, look, you weren't going to bring jobs here anyway, but if you come, we'll abate your taxes for some period of time so that you can invest and you can grow here. I mean, that's how Toyota got here. That's how UPS expanded. That's how the Beshear administration has created 10,000 jobs in the last year and a half or so. And Kentucky's doing pretty well right now. We can do even better. I mean, Governor Beshear just won the Governor's Cup for being the #1 economic development state in the entire country. On a per capita basis, our new business filings with the Secretary of State, #2 in the country. So we've got to build on this. We've got to build on this. And my opponent's right in some respects. We do need to do some tweaks to our tax structure. I support phasing out the state portion of the inventory tax over my first 4 years as governor. I think in a state where logistics are this important, we ought not have that. I do think we can take a look at cutting the corporate income tax rate a little bit. I want to make us as competitive as possible as we can be with other states. But our economic development cabinet, folks, does a really good job of getting the tax structure for a prospect to a good place. Oftentimes what they break down is workforce, finding the skilled workers they need for the jobs they want to create. And it's going to take someone with a background in education who knows how to do this, who knows how to re-engineer the workforce development cabinet, who wants to get our community and technical schools actually meeting the needs of local employers, which many of them are not doing right now. I mean, we see that problem in northern Kentucky. I see that problem in central Kentucky. So we're really going to have to focus on this and make certain we have the best workforce development program to actually supply the jobs for people that want to come here.
My next question is my longest one. I should have told you guys you have waters at your podiums if you need any kind of a swig here.
Into it right now. I feel like we're being warned.
There you have it.
I'm going to go with coffee, Joe.
There you have it. Okay. The Clinton Global Initiative announced recently it will help efforts by the East Kentucky Power Cooperative and the Project Lead the Way to transform Eastern Kentucky into a center for science, technology, engineering, and math. You know, it stands for STEM education, in order to bring a high-skill, high-wage job and employment to the region. What specifically will you do to improve education in rural Kentucky and encourage the best and brightest to come home and or stay home? General Conway, 2 minutes.
Well, let me say this. I think whether you're a Democrat, Independent, Republican, urban, rural, there's one value we all share as Kentucky. And that's that we want our kids to have good schools. And if they're so willing, we want them to have opportunities at home. That's something we all share as Kentuckians. And so you're talking about the Clinton Global Initiative in Eastern Kentucky. I'm going to work to make certain that we continue the SOAR initiative. I have a good working relationship with Congressman Rogers, always have. He and I worked together on the prescription pill issue in Eastern Kentucky. I worked with Operation Unite, was even given the Soaring Eagle Award as being the easiest agency for Operation Unite to work with. So a lot of these issues require reaching across the aisle. Now, to your specific point about education, I would say two things as it pertains to rural Kentucky. Number one, early childhood development. If I'm your next governor, and I think I'm going to be, then we're going to make a major focus early childhood education. That child that is kindergarten ready is the one that will test well in grade school, go on to be college and career ready. It's going to be a major focus of our administration. It would be my wife's signature issue if she's the first lady. We believe in it passionately. And we have too many kids in rural areas and single-parent families that aren't getting exposed to the tools they need at the tenderest ages to make certain they learn. And that's how you break the cycle of poverty in a state like Kentucky. Now, secondly, what would you do on education for rural areas on the other end? Making certain, as I said before, that our community and technical schools are actually training for the jobs that are out there. I was in northern Kentucky a couple of months ago, and the chamber leaders up there said, Jack, we had to go to Gateway Community and Technical College and say, look, we need more skilled mechanics. We need people in IT. We need people in advanced manufacturing. They said, hire people and train to this at this community and technical school. Well, that's backwards. Those community and technical schools need to be assessing their geographic region each and every year and then meeting the needs of local employers. So we've got to refocus the Kentucky Community and Technical College system on its mission. We need to do a better job of counseling juniors and seniors in high school and through the entire spectrum of education, getting our workforce ready for the jobs of tomorrow.
Mr. Bevan, 2 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, we hear a lot of talk about things like STEM degrees, but what are we really doing to incentivize the creation of them? Again, I'm a guy who grew up in a rural environment. Most people that I grew up with didn't go on to college. But increasingly, I left when I was 18. There was nothing to bring me home. There was no opportunity. So again, what you're asking about is very personal to me. It's very real to my life. And to that end, this is something that I'm very mindful of. I'm an employer. We talk about these skilled jobs. We talk about tool and die guys and welders, et cetera, and how difficult it is to find folks. I'm the only one here who employs such people even now and has employed such people for decades. I understand how difficult that is. I understand the thing that is needed for the training of such folks. If we want certain outcomes, we need to incentivize those outcomes. We need to use outcomes-based funding when we allocate your tax dollars to our public education institutions of higher learning. We have to do so. Because if we say we want certain types of technical degrees, we should not allocate as much money to somebody who's studying French literature or philosophy. Because with all due respect to those, they are not going to help resolve this situation. This is a state where not every kid needs to get a four-year degree. That's a canard that, frankly, we need to lose. But we do need post-secondary education. It does start early. I have 9 children. This matters to me pretty personally and pretty tremendously. The decisions that I make as a father every day are the kind of things that dovetail into how I think about all the children of Kentucky. We've got to be intentional about the things we incentivize. If you go back and look at my blueprint for a better Kentucky, I talked 2 weeks after I announced back in the primary about the need to focus on vocational training, about ensuring that we actually have the types of programs to prepare young people for the post-secondary world so that they can become, as Thomas Jefferson said, virtuous citizens, people who contributed to the society around them and were an integral part of their communities. And to this point, it does transcend any party. This must happen.